Hey guys, if you can think about how you found this podcast, maybe it's on Instagram or TikTok, maybe someone shared it with you. I don't run ads for the show or have sponsorships, so the only way this grows is through word of mouth. If this was valuable for you in any way, my only ask is if you could share this with someone who you think would help their investing journey or business. Thanks a lot, and let's get to the episode. And welcome back to STR Like the Best. I'm your host, Michael Chang. It's my great pleasure to welcome Gil Chan to the show. Gil, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Gil, great to have you on the show. We met at STR Wealth conference in Nashville back in February.
Yeah.
So you've been busy ever since with your properties and new projects. So I'm excited to talk more about that.
Life has not slowed down at all.
But before we start off, why don't you maybe I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself to the audience, kind of what you do and your portfolio particularly.
Yeah. So I'm a short-term rental host myself. I have 3 properties, 2 in the Smoky Mountains and 1 in Branson, Missouri. Been hosting for a couple of years now, and then I'm also the CEO and founder of Crafted Stays, which is a direct booking platform. I love what I do. It's been a wild journey. I never thought that a few years back that I would transition my entire career to be all centered around short-term rentals, but short-term rentals pretty much is all consuming my entire life, both on the side hustle side, my personal W-2. It's everything. It's all consuming now.
No, I totally understand. And my wife and I similarly, it's like we started with one property back in 2016, and now it's like literally our full-time jobs, both of us managing a portfolio and kind of being talking about our journey and hopefully getting others to see that this isn't that scary, and it's definitely a viable path. And I think that probably the best path for small investors to invest in real estate into cash flow. So let's definitely start, and let's definitely hit on some of those topics. So you left your W-2. What were you doing before short-term? What were you doing when you got your first property?
Yeah, so I was a product director for 14 years. I've been making software technology products, many products that many of our listeners may have used at some degree. I've done everything from smart home. So if you ever use any Samsung TV and you saw smart things on there,
yeah,
I was part of that in the very, 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 very early days when we're still a Kickstarter. If you ever bought anything from Nordstrom, Sephora, Home Depot, and they send you an email at the very end saying that your package is on its way, it's coming tomorrow, sorry we missed you, whatever those, the whole entire infrastructure was built by a company called Narvar, and I kind of re-platformed them back in 2018 or so. I've been kind of building basically products for a long while now.
That's great, because you had this kind of really cool product management role or product role with technology, and then that probably helped you frame when you became a short-term rental investor too, and now with with Crafted Stays. Before we let's talk about when you first started. What was your first property when you got your first your short-term rental?
Yeah, so for me, the reason why, the why first of why I got my first property, and it's probably not the same why that I have now, was I was paying a lot in taxes. And that's kind of why I got in short-term rentals. And I did long-term rentals for a little while. And it just, when I went to buy a CPA, and I was like, I just bought a long-term rental. Why is my tax the same? Why is it no different? Oh, yeah, it's non-passive income. And so it doesn't really it's passive income. So it doesn't really offset your W-2 income. So I later found out that short-term rental was the only way that I can offset my taxes. And so I looked into it, and I ended up finding out okay, an easy market to kind of get into. And at that time, the Smokies was still really, really hot. The prices were still pretty reasonable. We're starting to get a lot of new folks coming into it, but it was still a very good entry point for me.
When was that actually? When was that exactly?
21, 22.
Okay.
Yeah, 21, 22. Right. Yeah. So not that long ago. But we bought our first cabin. It was a 4-bedroom cabin. And we didn't know what we were doing. But luckily, I had peers in my area that did short-term rentals. Like I said, I later found out that actually within my network, there were 2 other of my friends that were doing short-term rentals. And we ended up starting a Slack group, and we started joining a lot of Facebook groups. And about this, but we started just sharing a lot of information. And that actually lowered not just the risk, but the anxiety of getting started in it.
Yep.
So like if I were to like give one tip to anyone that's getting started in short-term rentals, is just like find folks that you can get mentorship from, that you can spend a good chunk of time. They're willing to give you their time, and they want to see you succeed. Like those are going to be the folks that really help you get started in the very early days. And honestly, once you get that first one, the second one's super easy. The third one is super easy. Like it's just that first one is like there's a learning curve there because you're not just learning how to start a short-term rental, you're learning how to furnish it, you're learning how to do your financials. There's a lot of things that come together that you don't realize when you first get into it, and it does feel like a pretty big weight in the very beginning. But if you have a good network, if you have folks around you that can help you guide you through the way, you'll be able to kind of like almost like take a bullet train straight through the whole entire journey.
No, I agree. It's and I think that first part is, to your point, really difficult. Getting off zero is very difficult in the beginning because it can be very overwhelming, right? You're like, look, I mean, you got to find a property, buy it, and then all the work afterwards. Like I think you and I connected through that Slack channel. I forget who invited me into the Slack channel, but that was probably like over a year ago now. And you're
I
right,
think that
like
was probably Kenny.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Kenny. You're right. And I mean, it was great to. I mean, it was for me. It was a different perspective seeing, you know, these owners that I never met and the way that they ran their business. Like, even though I have been doing it for like 5 years, I learned a bunch. And there was a lot of Smokies owners there, like both you and I own there, and problem guests, like the vendor, kind of being able to quality control vendors and get feedback and pricing. It's like super valuable. And and I think that is a really really important point. Is like if you don't know where to start, like find people that have done it before. Facebook groups are a great place. Your local real estate meetup, like wherever you can find people that. I think it's also important, like find people that you connect with. I mean, it's hard. Like I'm, 44 and I have two kids. Like it's hard for me to connect with probably like a 20-year-old that like is just starting out and doing their thing. But like if you find someone else that is you and that person on the same wavelength, similar values, similar background, whatever it is. I think there's that kind of like trust there that you can kind of bond a lot easier, and then that trust factor is a lot higher, and then you kind of take the advice that you're given, because sometimes it's hard actually. It's just like you hear the advice but like you don't take the advice, and like you got to you got to hear it from someone that you like believe in and trust to take that advice. But that's great. That's, and the tax part is huge too. How did you, like, I guess, how did you figure, like, the short term, the short term tax loophole, as it's called? Um, how did you get comfortable with that? I think a lot of people have questions on that too. Like, oh, well, like, how do you actually execute that? Let's talk about your personal journey on that. Like, how did you learn about it and ultimately execute on that strategy?
Yeah, I think I got comfortable on it. So I did a lot of homework, and I'm one to not be weary about like just doing your homework and learning about things. And I was listening to Bigger Pockets for a long time. I listened to like a couple hundred episodes
Oh
kind of in
wow.
my long-term rental days. Yeah.
Okay.
Like I followed them for years during my long-term rental days. And I started hearing about this short-term rental loophole. And then the more I dug into it, the more I understood it. And when I understood it, then I wasn't scared. Because like if as long as you understand the mechanics behind it, then you know what you need to do to make sure that you're doing it properly. Like material participation, how many hours do you need to put into it? How do you record those hours? How do you make sure you validate those? Like if you understand kind of like how, like if you were to get audited, what would be the worst case scenario, and you protect yourself against that worst case scenario, then it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, agreed. And for folks that don't know what the short term rental tax loophole is, it's basically where you can, if you buy a short term rental, right, something that you rent out fewer than 7 days on average, you don't provide any substantial services, and you materially participate in that. So you're actually working on that rental. You can basically take the losses from that property through bonus depreciation and offset your W 2 income. So it's definitely a mouthful there. And, you definitely want to consult like a tax professional and understand how to mechanically execute this stuff. But once you do, it's very, very powerful. Back when, Gil and I first did it in 2021, you're getting 100% bonus tax depreciation. Now we're getting 60, so it's not as good. Next year I'll be 40, and then 20, then 0, unless these tax laws get changed. But even at 60, it's still pretty meaningful. We're in contract for a property that should close by mid-June here, and that's going to knock off a six-figure amount from our tax
Yep.
liability too. So it's a very, very powerful strategy. But you have to do it right. You got to record your hours and do a whole bunch of things. But thankfully, there are all these apps and stuff now too that we didn't have before. I forget what it's called. But I use an app that records all the hours and everything, and so that's make sure you record your hours. If you're doing this, make sure you record your hours. You're not, you know,
Yeah.
you can't
Yeah,
you
like
can't do it all
I
day.
was
Sorry, go ahead.
I was paying for one of those apps, and it was actually pretty expensive. It was like $20 a month to just record my hours.
I know.
And I thought about it for a little while, and I was like, wait a minute. All they are doing is they're creating a table entry for every single time I do something and uploading a picture. And I was like, I can use Notion. So I ended up redoing that whole entire thing and moved everything into Notion.
Oh, did
and
you
so
really?
now I moved everything over. And so in our STR community, I actually share that Notion template. So like if anyone actually wanted to like record hours and have everything tracked and tied to the property and who actually made the hour contributions, like just reach out and I can share it.
Oh, you gotta send it
was
to
so
me.
easy.
Like I use Reps Tracker, so I pay $20 a month on Reps Tracker. So
That's exactly what I was using.
yeah. Oh
That's
man,
exactly.
cool. All right, awesome. I'll hit you up afterwards to
Yeah.
get it. I definitely. I think I'm paying like $20 a month for this thing. So yeah, if I can avoid $200 a year on my subscriptions, I happily do it. That's great. Look, I mean, that really speaks volumes to your technical background. Um, how has that helped you in like your short-term rental journey? Because you have some marketing stuff too, right? Like you said, for some of the e-com names that you mentioned earlier, like the post checkout flow is something that you worked on, and that email marketing side is really important. Thank you again for sharing your Smokies post checkout
Yeah.
flow. It took us like a month to implement that on Clavia, but we finally got it done, and so it's actually running now.
Oh
So
yeah.
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 I appreciate that. So yeah, we finally. It took my VAs probably like, because it was like a second priority thing. That I was like, work on this when you have time, and so it took us like 3-4 weeks to get it right and get everything working, tuned properly. So thank you for that. That was very helpful. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
But maybe
Yeah.
talk about how that's helped you, like that mindset's kind of like helped you be successful with those 3 rentals that you have.
Yeah. I think for me, like I'm now in my 7th startup now.
Oh
So
wow.
6 startups that I've helped others build, and so this is the 7th one, and the first time I'm doing it as an entrepreneur. Baby's basically the one leading it. I was like an early member on many of them, but being the founder is a very different story. But the whole like startup journey really taught me just like take it one step at a time, and you really don't know what's going to be ahead. But if you can find folks in your network that helps you, it just makes it a whole lot easier. I do leverage technology, like you mentioned. Like I have, like being in technology, being in e-commerce for so long, I know a lot of tools that folks don't typically use for STRs. So you mentioned Klaviyo. Like Klaviyo is one of the most powerful tools in e-commerce. A lot of e-commerce brands will use Klaviyo to send out email campaigns, and it's really, really inexpensive. It does get SMS as well too. It's almost like a hidden gem that our industry doesn't know about. But if you do any homework in e-commerce and you just YouTube it about like sending out email campaigns for a new product that you build, they're going to give you Klaviyo. And honestly, there's not a whole lot of differences between the e-commerce industry and our industry. You're both creating a product, creating a service that you're trying to attract others to get to you. In the e-commerce industry, you have giants like Amazon that helps you with distribution. On our side, you have giants like Airbnb and VRBO to do distribution. And if you don't want to do that, or if you want to go independent, you can start your own direct bookings, or in the e-commerce world, you can start your own Shopify store.
Yeah.
So like there's a lot of parallels, and like because of that, like that's kind of like how I even started with Craft Estates. Like that was like the origin story, is like I come from e-commerce and I see how easy it is to be able to build your own storefront in the e-commerce industry. Like if you had a product that you wanted to sell, you can build a storefront in a day. But I look back in our industry, if you wanted to do the same thing, you would have to hire an agency. You can use the cookie cutter like PMS website tools, but like there's not a lot of good tools out there. And I was like, it's got to be a lot easier. And I just started building it. I coded it myself, like the first version of it, and I relearned how to code. I'm not a developer, but I can learn pretty quickly, and I coded the first version myself, and I started shopping it around, and folks loved it. And then my engineering friends were like, "It's great, Gil, but you're not an engineer. Like, it took you 3-4 weeks to build this. I can build this in a week." And I was like, "You're right." So I ended up eventually hiring engineers to take over my development job, and I do a lot of the design. I do a lot of like the requirements gathering and like really about the user journey and what the experience is like. But I no longer code it myself, which has been a real advice, like a really good advice I took on early in that journey.
Yeah, and on that note, the parallels between ecom and short-term rentals. A big part of what I try to get across to people too is that you know it takes time in the beginning to launch it and get it up and running. But fundamentally, like you as the founder, as a CEO, should not be doing like the short-term equivalent of like answering phone calls and like writing your listing descriptions and writing your captions and all that stuff, right? Like there are people out there that are better equipped to do that. And as a founder, I think, or as the owner of the property, owner of the business, it's important to like know those things, but also like what's the next property, right? Like how do you like being able to think more strategically than like just being on that tactical level every single day? Because fundamentally, if you're coding all day, you have no time to really grow the business. And like if you're answering customer service messages all day, you definitely don't have any time to like grow your portfolio because you're going to be so burnt out dealing with like a broken AC or a clogged toilet that like you have no energy afterwards to like deal with anything more high level. I think that's a great way of framing those two industries together. While we're on the topic though, like what other great, Klaviyo, great tool, Crafter Saves we're going to talk about. Like what other great tools that are like not as well known that you can pull from the ecom background to short term rentals. I asked this selfishly because Klaviyo is a great tool, so I'm hoping for others on
Yeah.
that we can incorporate too.
Yeah. So I haven't found a good like backend CRM on that. Klaviyo kind of does a bit of that. I started actually with MailChimp, and MailChimp's
Yeah,
actually pretty well known in the e-commerce industry as well too. The other ones are less tools, but more tactics. So a lot of advertising, for instance, and social media. Actually, social media and advertising, there's a lot of parallels there. So like there's tools like Metricool. Metricool allows you to schedule all of your posts. So a lot of times in e-commerce, especially the smaller e-commerce folks, they will batch post. So they'll create a bunch of content very early on in somewhere in the month. They'll shave off like 2 days into the month, and they'll batch create content, and they'll basically schedule it out so that they have one post every day or one post every week, whatever their cadence is, and they don't have to think about it until the next month or the next period. So like tools like Metricool is used pretty heavily. Another one is on the advertising side, like Facebook ads, Google ads are used pretty heavily. So like the thing I learned is that like if you need help on some of these things, very likely if you go on YouTube, you won't find any short-term rental specific guides on it.
yeah.
But if you want to learn how to run ads, go on YouTube and say run ads for a Shopify store or run ads for whatever, and you'll get a whole bunch of folks creating really good content that have gone through it. Like that is probably like the one secret sauce from the e-commerce world that like I want users to be able to like learn from another industry and try to apply that back in here.
Gotcha. Oh, that's really smart. Actually, no, there's very little, and that's a good segue. Yeah, there's very little content on how to properly market your property, and and I think that's the problem that you're trying to solve with Craft to Stays. And I do want to hit on that, but before we hit on that though, I want to just round out your short-term rental portfolio. So you have the one in the Smokies, and then the two in Branson. How have those done, right? Like you started in 21, so you started buying in 21. Like what shift in the market have you seen? Just to, kind of round out that thread.
Yeah. So I think in my journey, I could have bought properties faster earlier on. And I think my first property underperformed to my standards that made me hesitant to buy the second one. And what I learned later on was that, like, I think David Green talks a lot about this in the Bigger Pockets. Like, your first property is not always going to be a home run. And I was expecting a home run or waiting for it to be a home run before I got to my second property. And that was a huge mistake. I basically wasted a whole entire year where I was trying to optimize this one property to make it perform better and better. And it's just, I could have bought a little bit better on that first one. It didn't have a view. It was big, but it didn't have a view. Now we've actually added a lot of amenities to it. So like it's in kind of the valley side of Gatlinburg. So you don't get views, but it's very easy to get to. So like a lot of like RVs, a lot of big families, that we have a big driveway that can fit like 6 cars on there. We have a huge lawn. So we ended up investing into what will make that property stand apart from others, given that we don't have a view. So we ended up doing like a putt-putt course in the front and a really big fire pit in there, like an 8-person fire pit in there. And there's still room on that lawn. So like that is like the thing that I learned is I couldn't have optimized the pricing any better. I couldn't have optimized the pictures any better. And it took me a little while for me to buy my second property. And my second property is my pool cabin in Gatlinburg. So I had 2 in Gatlinburg, one in Branson. That pool cabin does extremely well. It actually outperformed my 4-bedroom. And the costs are actually a lot lower too on that one. So that was like a big surprise to me. So like I started to learn a little bit more about the market, about what works, what doesn't work. And for me, it's more important for me to learn what works and what doesn't work, and then apply those learnings on my next one. So if I were to buy another cabin, it'll be probably similar to the second cabin that I purchased there.
What's the second? What's the second cabin look like? Does it have a view? So it has a pool? Is it like a nice indoor pool, or is it like a glorified hot tub? Like I have one. It's a pool cabin. It's candidly like a glorified like hot tub. It's just like it's not really. You can't really swim.
Yeah.
You just kind of like white waddle in there.
It depends on it's not that big. It takes up maybe a third of the entire footprint of the length of the building.
Okay, that's decent.
So it's not, and it's almost as wide as the width of the building minus whatever the walls and the buffer there. So it takes up a pretty good portion. It's not one of those where, like, I see a lot of pool cabins where you step into it and like you take 2 steps and you're already in the pool, and you can pretty much touch all 4 walls. Like it's actually like a pool. It was like a converted bedroom into a pool room.
Yeah.
But this is like it takes up the entire basement of the cabin. So
okay.
We have a loft which has a bedroom, and then we have the main level that has a living room, dining room, kitchen, and then we have a rec room that has an extra bunk bed in there as well too. And then the whole bottom basement is all pool. So there's nothing else in the bottom basement except for pool. And we've done everything. We've done like really like nice seating in there. We put in a theater in there. So and we put in the theater because we have 2 young kids. And when we stayed in there, we're like, gosh, we're all like, the kids can be in there for hours. And like, we didn't want to be bored being in there. So we're like, okay, it would be nice to have a movie here. So we decided to put it in a theater so that we can enjoy the space and not have to feel like we have to go upstairs to do something else or entertain ourselves. We want to be near our kids.
Oh, like you
so
put a TV.
So
you just put a TV in there and seating. Oh, nice. That's awesome.
There's a 100-inch projector in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's
nice.
Yeah, it's a pretty sizable projector. But yeah, it's performed really, really well, and everybody loves that cabin. Yeah.
Got it. That's awesome. That's great. Do you have a mural? Do you have a mural in there? Do you do a mural?
No, I probably wouldn't actually, because like the projector comes down on the wall that I would normally put a mural anyways, and it's for families. Like I know my avatar, and my avatar is families, and my kids are not going to stand in front of a mural and take a picture. And I probably won't post it. It'd go viral. So like, I'd rather put in amenities that actually stick with my avatar. So I never considered putting a mural in there, and probably wouldn't.
Can you talk about that actually? How important? Because that's a really great point actually. And I think that kind of gets lost in when people are thinking about, even before they're buying a property, like as they're coming into this journey, like how when they buy that first property, and then how important it is to like know your avatar. And I feel like you're like really good at this. So
I would say like in the buying phase, your avatar is not that important. I think the more important parts are like, does the numbers figure out? Does the numbers actually like math up? It's when you go into like the designing and the marketing phase where the avatar really is really important. Like you want to make sure that you're choosing furniture that fits in with the aesthetics of what people want, but also the functionality. Like, do they want big comfy couches to sit on, or do they need a sleeper sofa because there might be extended stays from other family members? Like, so I think the avatar is definitely important during the design phase. and definitely important when you're building out your website, doing your marketing, doing your listing photos, any of that stuff is like that's really important. But when
Mm.
you're buying, it's really about are you getting a cash on cash return? Is there the ROI there? Does it pencil out? That's like the most important part.
The art, the number is definitely super important in the initial phase. Because what I was mentioning, or at least the way I think about it when we're buying the property, like this property that we're buying in upstate New York, when we're thinking Avatar, it's like actually for me it was more of families, or am I looking for like two families where they're going to come together and enjoy the mountains and the kind of the natural amenities around where they are, versus an area where it's much more known for like gatherings, like not partings, kind of like a lot of single people up from New York City to come up and hang out. And I was like, I don't really want to. The numbers kind of shook out, but I really didn't want to deal with those kind of that client avatar, just given what I know, kind of the second order impacts of that. But that's what I meant. But you're absolutely right though. The design phase which we're in now is super important on like what exactly that you want to, how you want to show the property. The amenities are going to be really important. And then, kind of on to our next point, the marketing part, right? Like how do you write the copy? How do you, when you're building your direct website? So, like I mean, in short term rental land, I think you mentioned this earlier in the beginning. Airbnb, Verbo, slash Expedia, Google Travels. Like, there's some real big aggregators there that really control distribution. And what we mean by that is the first thing people do is when they want to go, stay at a short-term rental is they go on Airbnb, right? Like just like when you want to buy something, you're probably going to go on Amazon or Walmart.com, right? If you're in the US, like you're probably going to go on Airbnb or Verbo if so those are always kind of those are always the first choices, right? And so they really get all those first eyeballs. You have to be on those platforms. So let's hit on that first. Like from your perspective, like how important are these aggregators, and like what's the bet? What are some like tips that you can give on showing up on page one and performing really well on Airbnb, for example?
Yeah. So I think like the first and foremost, like a lot of the industry would not be where it is today without these aggregators or marketplaces, however you want it, or these platforms basically. If you wanted to get into short-term rentals and Airbnb didn't exist, it would take you a long while to drum up enough eyeballs onto your website to be able to sustain your mortgage and whatnot. So like I think it's super smart, and like every host should be on those platforms and heavily invest into those platforms for the first 1 to 2 years. If not, maybe even more. But like that for first 2 years, you're trying to you're trying to make sure you get a mortgage and you're hitting your targets, but you're also using that as your marketing mechanisms. So you're collecting emails with every guest that stay with you. You're starting to find out where your guests are coming from, and you can use all that information. So come year two, you're starting to build out your direct booking engine. And the main reason like I got started in direct bookings in the first place was I have a lot of anxiety of having all my eggs into one basket. If for whatever reason, if they don't delist me, but they bump me from page 1, 2 to like page 12, there's a good chance that like you won't hit your revenue targets. And just having all that control on their side and me not having the ability to influence that gives me a lot of fear. Whereas like in direct bookings, if you need to fill slots, you can send out email campaigns, you can run advertising. Like if there's a particular week that you're trying to fill, you can advertise specifically for that week without having to drop your prices. So you have a lot more control on the direct booking side. But if you're launching your first Airbnb or your first short-term rental, Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com, like those are all really good platforms to help you really like stretch out that first year and really get those traction there. But as you progress into your journey, especially as your portfolio grows, you definitely want to start to diversify your mix. And even if you don't diversify to direct, definitely diversify between the different OTAs as well too.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I think the first year really, at least for me, I think kind of think more broadly that for your first year, you got to get your master's degree on all the OTAs, right? Like Airbnb, you start, but that's like a month. Like get that up and running, get your 3 reviews so you can get your score. And now, they've kind of changed that around a little bit to it with super hosts and guest favorites, and they're really trying to differentiate the product on platform. So I think that's something that is will be I'm curious to see how that evolves. But then getting on book, depending on the market, getting on VRBO, getting on Booking.com, getting on Expedia, getting on Marriott, getting on Google Travels. There's like a long tail of distribution that, I think for us now, like when we first started, Airbnb was like 90+% of the business. Now we're like 60-ish. The other ones make up 35. Direct bookings, like candidly, are like 5%. This is kind of where I want to go. I would like to get that. Like, what is a reasonable, like, I think for most people, like, what is a reasonable number to get to? If you have, say you own 3 or 4 properties, like, what's a reasonable number to get at? Like, what should be like a reasonable target?
It depends. I think like over the span of like 3 or 4 years, you want to get to that 60%, 50, 60%.
Direct bookings?
At that point, yeah.
Wow,
Because
really?
at that point, you've now collected emails from hundreds, if not thousands of guests. So it's not just the guests. And like I use StayFi. So like a lot of people talk about StayFi. The good thing about that is you're not just collecting emails from the person that stayed with you or the person that booked with you, but also the 10 other people that might be staying there as well too. So you have a much broader audience that you can start to market towards. So at the end of even 1 year, you can have thousands of emails coming from just a single property that you can start to market towards. So if you start to extrapolate that towards like many years, you have a lot more ability to market to a wider audience and be able to directly book with them over a period of time. And it takes a long time to get there. Most folks, they'll try direct bookings, and after like 4 or 5 months, they don't start to see the traction, then they start to give up. It's something that you have to nurture for a longer period of time. And I find that folks that do spend the time and the efforts and they continually monitor as much as they monitor their Airbnbs, their listing on Airbnb, like those are the ones that can get to that rate. But it does take effort. And I think like some properties can get there easier than others. So like for instance, in our Smokies place, a lot of folks that visit Smokies are annual visitors. People that go in there year after year, or maybe they'll skip a year, but very likely they'll come back again. And if you're in that type of market, you're more likely to get repeat bookings.
Right, agreed.
On top of that, if you have a larger portfolio where they're able to get the same experience that they got with you the first time, but they're able to experience a different cabin of yours, that starts to up your conversion rate as well too. So there's a different combination of different things, but definitely like if you're in markets where you have multiple properties, it's an annual visitorship. Like those are folks that really perform really well in direct bookings. The other side of it is like if you have a unique stay, if you have a nice A-frame, or you have properties that just shine itself and people like to send traffic towards that, those are ones that you actually don't even need 3 years to get to that point. Like you can actually get a good amount of direct bookings in a very short time frame because a lot of folks are sending traffic back to your direct booking site.
So let me ask you. So that's okay. So that's great, and I think a lot. Me as an investor, I think a lot of people would love to be 50% direct. Right? There's a lot of benefit. There are a lot of benefits direct. Right? Like you think you hit on a lot of them. Direct marketing. You can avoid the platform risks of they delist. You write something bad on social media and then your account gets banned. That's something recent that's happened with some people. And you just have a lot more control over that distribution. Now, I think there are some downsides to that too, that aren't kind of said, right? Like you got to build the same tooling yourself. You got to build all the marketing. And also you don't get the protection of Airbnb, right? You don't get the,
yes and no.
You have to do your own payments. There's a chargeback risk. You have to, if there's a liability part there that you'll have to manage. You can find third parties to manage that risk for you too. But damage from a property perspective, liability perspective, you don't have. There isn't a review system where you can kind of quality control your guests as well. So I think there definitely are protections built into Airbnb that are very valuable, at least from my perspective. I think very, very valuable. Now, is it worth 20%? Is it worth giving up a bunch of strategic autonomy? Like, no, right? But I think I think it's an important consideration, at least for me, as I think about distribution and risk management. To be candid, too, because slip and fall, or you get a bad guess, like you don't really want that. That's a world you don't want to kind of stand alone. Like having Airbnb air cover program is a pretty nice kind of fallback tool. And again, and also, like, you're not the merchant of record too. There, they are, and yeah. So I think there's a number of facets there, but I definitely agree. Like, I mean, for me, that's like one of the biggest things that we're focused on is like doing better on the direct booking site. So for us, we use Hostaway, and we use the PMS um, direct booking site, which is really just a landing. It's not really a direct booking site. It's really a glorified landing page. So maybe on that, like, let's talk about that. Like, with craft estates or just with a different solution. Other people like Boostly is a big in the space too. They have their own direct marketing site. But let's just talk about kind of the PMS direct booking site versus a more bespoke solution, a more unique solution, a more crafted solution. Maybe let's start there first, and then we can talk about you versus crafted estates versus like the competition, your competition.
Yeah, I would say like we partner pretty well with the different PMSs. So Craft Stays is partnered with OwnerRez. We are partnered with Hospitable, Hostaway, and we're looking at a few more as well too, probably in the next 6 weeks. But they know that their direct booking site meets a certain category of folks. And for folks that want something a bit more mature, they are more than happy to kind of redirect them towards us. So like honestly, like if you're just getting started and you need a direct booking site, like just like you, like the PMS site is actually good enough. If you're looking for just somewhere for someone who's like, hey, can I book with you directly? Again, like just send them the link, and that works really well. But if you're starting to send email marketing campaigns, if you're starting to do social, you're starting to do a lot more marketing towards it, then you want that brand consistency. You want it to look a little bit more polished. You may want to have different amenities and different like showcase different things on your website. For instance, like we have a lot of hosts that are co-hosts as well too. So they actually have dedicated pages built onto our craft estates. And this is like one of the big requests that we had is like, hey Gil, like we love your templates. It looks really good. But like I want to be able to advertise my co-hosting services, or I want to be able to showcase things to do in my area so I show better in search results. So like those types of things you just don't get from the property managing like websites, and that's not their focus.
Yeah,
The
for sure.
PMS is really there to help you scale your operations, is there to help you automate a whole bunch of things. And a lot of them invest into the direct booking sites because they want a low barrier to entry thing for folks to be able to like be able to rebook. But they're not spending even probably like 10, 20, 30% of their resources towards that feature set. They rather spend it on AI automation for messaging. It's
Yeah,
a big
for
one
sure,
that I've
for
seen
sure.
quite a bit. And there's some differences. Like some like Hospitable actually spends a decent amount of effort on the direct bookings as well too. So it kind of varies between the different PMSs, but mostly the PMSs, they focus more on automations, and the direct booking side of it, they do a fairly good job for something that's just out the box. But if you want something a little bit more, you're doing a lot more traffic driving, then you want something a bit more polished.
Agree. Agree. I 100% agree. It's great for us. It's great because the people that have come to us that want, yeah, exactly that message. Send us an email afterwards. Say, hey, love it. Like, how do I book next time without paying the OTA fees, without paying 20% to Airbnb? And we're like, here's the website. Because there, it's like you already kind of built it. You're not really marketing anymore. It's actually just a booking. It's actually just really like a scheduling site, because they're like,
It's a checkout.
yeah,
It's
it's a
more checkout
checkout.
than
Yeah, like I know
yeah.
you. I've been there. Like I know this isn't scammy. Like I just don't want to. I just want to book direct and I can save some money, right? And for us, it's great to do that. We don't have to have someone to go and check all the calendars and do all that fun stuff. But then, like, there's that next step, right? To your point, like when you are marketing to people that aren't that ready to buy it, they need some more convincing. They need some more marketing, right? So maybe talk about, so like, how does a website help convert people that aren't just looking to make that purchase but need a little more convincing? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, how does that help? Like, how
Yeah.
does that help me to do that, accomplish that goal?
Yeah, so I think of it as like the user journey or the story that folks go through. Like they're landing on your site. If for instance you ran an ad and you're driving them towards it, and you're driving them to like a PMS site that doesn't have a whole lot of content, doesn't tell you about your story, why you got started, gives you that connection there. It's really hard for that person to convert. But what we try to do is on our templates, we try to guide the user through who they are, how they resonate with us. So for instance, like on my direct booking site, like I make it very clear that we're specifically for families. All 3 of our cabins are family friendly stays. And on multiple parts of our website, we try to make that very, very clear. And we have dedicated sections of our website that kind of clearly lays that out so that it helps connect with our avatars much better. Down the road, that we want to actually do a lot more. We want to be able to do more advertising, email collection on the websites itself. It's like, I think for us at Craft Stays, it's the website is just like one part of what the long-term journey for us is. It's really, how do we bring the tools to short-term rental hosts to be really successful in direct bookings? And maybe emails down the road, maybe welcome guides, whatever it may be. But we're thinking about the whole entire journey of how someone finds you for the first time, how they may re-find you again, and really provide them with the tools. And we might not do it all alone. Like we definitely won't do it all alone. We're trying to find like the best partners to work with, the folks that do things really, really well. Like StayFi is a really good friend of ours. Like they do email collection better than anyone else. It's like, can we partner with partners like those and bring the tools together so that people don't have to learn everything from scratch?
How do you think about like for StayFi, for example? I've seen people out there kind of, they'll put a QR code next to the Wi-Fi and say, hey, if you want the QR code, scan here, and then there's a pop-up that says, please provide, give us your email, we can send you something cool or something like that. Like, how do you think about that versus? I'm just trying to think about folks that don't want to have more hardware, like more costs. Like, would you think like those solutions are fine, or like just go with battle tested solution and like instead of trying to jerry rig a bunch of stuff together?
I mean, at the very end of the day, what you're trying to solve is like, can you collect emails from as many folks as possible that are likely to book with you again, or likely to book with you for the first time? So if there's a QR code and that's how they get their Wi-Fi passwords, or the Wi-Fi password, and that works, and you get a pretty solid rate of, maybe there's 10 guests that can stay at your property, and on average you're getting eight email entries or 7 email entries, even 5. Like, that's not a bad rate. And you didn't have to invest into a monthly service. You didn't have to do any of that stuff. Like, that sounds pretty solid to me. But if you're looking to like get to that 100%, and like the other alternative is like you collecting 1 email, then like, yeah, go with StayFi then. Like, so it really depends on.
Are you getting 100%? Or what are you getting?
Yeah.
Really?
Pretty close.
Wow.
Pretty close. Yeah. I mean, our cabins are in the Smokies, so there's no like a lot of our cabins don't have great cell service.
Yeah, fair.
So if you want to use the internet, you're going to be using our Wi-Fi, and the only way to use our Wi-Fi is to go through StayFi. So like, yeah, we're getting 100%.
Fair enough.
And StayFi does good at like taking out the under 18 and so on, and they do email validation for us, which I'm sure like if you cobble something together, like you can do some of those things. Like you can have a checkbox that ignores under 18 and so on, but for us, like, it just works.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's more about like what works. Like in our industry, what I love about it is like we're all trying different things. We're all trying to see what sticks, what really resonates, and what are the tactics that we want to keep on trying like over and over again. So like if you're rolling something out, you can put StayFi in one of your cabins. You can try a QR code in one of the other ones and see which one works better than the other. And if it's worth continuing to roll out StayFi in all the other ones. But yeah, like just try it out and see if it's worth what you're putting into it.
Got it. So to get to 50%, right? Okay, so there's some steps that you have to get to. You need a proper website, right? So the PMS website probably isn't the right solution. We need a solution like Crafted Stays or something similar. You need a way to collect more emails than just the booker, right? So StayFi or a different solution. What other pieces of the puzzle do you need to
email? Some way to send out emails and remind them. And the thing that I learned probably more recently is that email does good. If you add on SMS to send them a reminder, that amplifies it quite a bit. Like the conversion rate can multiply by just sending them a text reminder saying, I sent you an email a couple of days ago with the coupon code. There's a few more days left, act now, or something along that. Like that amplifies your conversion quite a bit.
Gotcha.
And I'm just now learning about some of these tactics. Like we started a podcast because we found out like a lot of hosts with our tools can build a really good looking website. but to actually market and figure out the best way to market, there's not a whole lot of resources out there. So we try every week to bring on a new guest that has their own niche, that has their own way of doing things, and trying to just educate folks on how to be better effective marketers. And that's one of the things I learned on the show.
That's a great, and I need to start. I'll definitely look that up too, because that's a hole in our strategic planning that we need to button up, is getting that direct booking percentage up. On the marketing side, though, right? Like, maybe, as you've had some of your guests on the show, and just from your experience, like, I think that's a hard part for a lot of people. At least, and I'll speak for myself personally. You're getting, the organic emails are free, free-ish, right? Like, you need to pay for an email marketing solution, Stayfi, whatever it is, and then you pay for someone, or you can write your own emails. But those are the people that have only stayed at your property, right? You're not touching anyone else that's never been there. Ads are expensive. They're really expensive. Like, how do you, like, what are ways that you found that, get good ROI to get more people onto your site?
Yeah, so it depends. Again, like, what I like about it, what I like about like our industry is that everybody's properties, everybody's portfolio looks a little bit different. And we found that, like, we had one guest come on that has a property in a non-typical vacation market, and they get a significant amount of direct bookings. I think they're in like the 40%.
Wow.
And they get a lot from folks that travel there for fishing. So they work with the local fishing companies to send leads back and forth. And those folks, once you go fishing 1 year, they start to come back over and over and over again. So what they'll do is they'll go on the Facebook groups, in particular for that area. And anytime someone's asking, like, where can I stay, or what do you recommend for this area, they're able to inject themselves into that conversation. And because of that, they're able to, like, get a significant portion of their direct bookings in a very short time frame. So it really depends on what your makeup is. For something like for our cabins in the Smokies, it's a lot harder, because whenever someone asks, is there a great place to stay in Smokies, like, there's a dozen different messages that come in. It's hard to bleed through that noise. So we have to use other campaigns to try to win those guests over.
Yeah. No, that's it. There is
and some people may not get to 65.
Yeah,
there is like, in some places you may not get to that 60%. But if you think back, like, before Airbnb came around, there were only direct booking sites made by the big property management companies, and 100% of the bookings were direct.
Yeah. Fair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we just live in a different day now.
Yeah. I mean, lived in the day before for Airbnb, right? It's no, but, like, I mean, if I can get to 20, if I get 20 in 12 months from now, I'll be happy. So, like, I appreciate.
I think that's achievable.
Yeah. No. I'd love to talk to you more about that. I'd love to implement. Klaviyo has just helped already. Just getting a place where there can be an email, there can be a communication sequence post checkout. Like, that already is really, really helpful. Now, how do I, how do you continue to build on that? And I think for anyone that's listening right now, that you have your own, either you have your own properties, and maybe you're not doing as well on Airbnb as you were, the year before, or if you're new to the industry and you're worried about that Airbnb concentration risk, right? I hope that we all fear that risk, but it's just the industry the way it is, and it's nothing to be afraid of. It's actually helpful, because you're going to get a lot of eyeballs for, free, quote unquote, without having to do a whole ton of work. And it really is that next 12 months, 24 months, as you become an expert on the OTAs, and then think about, like, what's the next step. And then, craft stays is a great it's a solution that I'm definitely going to explore. For folks that are interested, have a PMS website or have their own properties, what's the best way to learn more about craft stays?
You could definitely visit our website, craftestays.co. We also have a guide on our website. So if you visit the website, you can download. I'll leave you the link of the guidebook. But in the guidebook, we kind of walk folks that are just getting started in direct bookings. It's like you would be a great one to kind of read through that guide. But it talks about, like, what's the first few stages of, like, building out your brand, building out your website, and how do you market towards that. And then towards the end of that guide, we have like 42 tips on
42.
how to drive more traffic.
Okay,
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. I don't know how we came up with the number, but, like, we've interviewed so many hosts like through our podcasts that we started adding more and more tips from each one of those podcasts into that ebook. So there might be like a 25 version next time with however many more. But like that has helped a lot of folks on like just getting started. Then there's a bunch of tips like if you're ever running ads, run value added ads. Like if you drive them towards your website and they're not very likely if you're running ads, they're not ready to book at that time. But if they're thinking about visiting the Smokies and you have content about things to do in the Smokies and you're collecting their emails, then you have a warm lead that you're able to drive more interest into that is similar to someone that has stayed with you in the past. So there's a lot of different tactics and how to think about it, but you kind of have to put on that marketing hat. But like you said, like that first year, it's really about getting your master's degree in operating a short-term rental.
Yep.
And then you start to explore, how do I juice my revenues a bit more? How do I make it more sustainable? How do I like de-risk the business risk of my short-term rental, my business, by investing into some of these things? It's definitely not one of the things like, oh, you just launched your short-term rental, and you, like that you're consuming so many things. Like, and even the marketing side, like just start small. Start with something that you think is that you can do on a consistent basis, and try to refine that. Try to learn that over time. So if it could be collecting emails, it could be sending out emails, it could be social, whatever it is. But don't try to like peanut butter and try to do it all. Try to get really good at one thing and learn what works, because it's that feedback loop that helps you get to that higher percentage.
Love it. I'll put in the show notes a link to Craft Estate's website. After I get off the podcast with Gil, I'm going to go and download it and read it myself. So I'm sure it's a great resource, and with your podcast as well, to listen to other guests and other hosts. I think that's really important to. If you're thinking about the industry, just listen to people that are already doing it. I think one, it demystifies it. It makes the barrier to entry lower. Like, these are all real people. We're all trying to figure it out. The industry is still young enough where like unique solutions can work and probably do work. And don't be afraid to get started. Like, it's not too late. There's plenty of room for creativity and entrepreneurship. Gil, congratulations on launching Crafted Stays on your 3 short-term rentals, and helping us de-risk this business model. It is a big risk, actually, the platform risk. So de-risking that, I think it's a very, very worthwhile endeavor, and appreciate you coming on the show today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show.